Next question. Dave says, when adding multiple syndication networks to a YouTube channel, is it better to add multiple two-tier rings in parallel, i.e. all fired by the same trigger, or to add additional tiers to a single network? Excuse me. All right. So Dave, I haven't done any, video SEO campaigns in several years now because I stopped attempting video SEO. It wasn't really, I use Google Ads for YouTube stuff now. So I want to just, I want to preface my answer to your question with that. I just want to be 100% clear that I don't do a whole lot of video SEO anymore at all. I still go through like the on-page process of optimizing a video before I upload it or publish it to the channel, whatever channel I'm publishing a YouTube video to. But as far as like hardcore SEO stuff for video, I just don't do that anymore because I use ads for that. That said, when I was doing, which for a long time, that was a pretty significant part of my income, was I was doing video SEO services for a number of clients, but also for a video production company so I had a whole lot of clients that they managed, but I just provided like wholesale SEO services to. During that time, I did a lot of testing. And what I found was you could get faster ranking results by having a whole bunch of like single tier networks connected to your channel, whatever channel you're using as a trigger. But what would happen is you would get, like, when you would live stream or upload a video, it would, syndicate or cascade across those syndication networks, and it would rank rather quickly. But then unless you were, and at the time it was more about links and stuff than it was engagement signals. So unless you started hammering that video with links and getting engagement signals at the same time, like it would start to, after a week or so, or just an initial like really good ranking, it would start to drop. And so what I learned over, and again, through testing, was that what I would do is the two-tier networks, but I would stack multiple two-tier networks onto the channel to where it wasn't any more than two tiers, right? I didn't go out to tier 3 and tier 4 and all of that. And there's a reason for that. And that is, that becomes much harder to manage, and also becomes harder to troubleshoot when stuff breaks down. And the more tiers you add going out, the likelier it is that something will break down. I'm not saying you can't do it. You can. We had one of our previous members, I think it was a female, and I think she took our syndication network stuff and created like these massive multiple tiers networks that would just absolutely crush anything. But what I found was all I would do is so 2-tier networks, right? Which would be tier 1 and then 3 second tiers, or tier 2 rings, I should say. I would stack for every new project at the time that I would start for video SEO stuff. If I was starting a new channel, for example, I would always come right out of the gate with 3 2-tier networks attached, which would be a total of 12 syndication networks, right? So 3 first-tier networks and then 9 tier 2 networks. And that was just what worked incredibly well. Like I said, 3 or 4 years ago, to not, like, the video wouldn't rank as quick when you would syndicate through that many networks, those 2-tier networks, in that same kind of setup that I just mentioned. So again, I would always come right out of the gate with 3 2-tier networks, and it wouldn't rank as quick, but when it did rank, it would stick, and it didn't slip it didn't dance as much, and it didn't fall back as quickly as just the single tier network. So with all that said, I don't know that that's still the case because I don't really do a whole lot of video SEO stuff anymore, but I would probably still opt for the 2-tier networks and just stack as many of those to get the results that I need. But don't forget that, just having syndication networks is, I mean, that's good in itself, but you can also power up existing networks. Or, like, for example, if you had one tier 2 network, so you'd have like the branded network around your channel, and then you'd have 3 persona-based themed networks, right? And you could add additional networks, but you could also spend money on powering up that network, that 2-tier network. So all 3 rings within that network. And again, I haven't tested this because it's been a few years, but my assumption right now would be that it would be better to power up a really well themed kind of network that has content that you're continually adding content to power that up, over adding more networks that haven't been powered up, if that makes sense. Now, if you have the budget and you can do both, you can add more networks and power them up, then that would be the way to go. But it really depends on what your budget is. So who wants to comment on that?
No, I totally agree on that. Themed network, right? Activity, relevance, trust, and authority. always try to get traffic into that, because part of art is activity.
That's right.
To get real traffic, and the real traffic, the ads training, the YouTube and Google Ads training, the Bradley does. It's a real simple way to get. If it's local, then people from that geographic area, and if it isn't local, then people who are at least interested, who haven't. And Bradley knows that you can create an affinity audience, people who have an affinity for this. Now, what Google considers an affinity and what you consider an affinity might be two different things. But the whole point in all this is, first and foremost, you're getting your credit card in Google. You're paying Google. You no longer become a leech. You're no longer a leech. You're actually a paying customer. You're paying for ads. Now you're a real person and entity who is part of this bigger entity that's now running ads to this other entity. So you see how it all begins to coalesce and take shape as it being a real thing. So now you take that and you drop those into maybe the tier one part of your network, because you should have a tier one, even though you're going to get a tiered network. You're going to have the main one, and then you're going to have the three blogging points: Blogger, Tumblr, and WordPress, which are going to distribute to your tiered network. You can still have your T1 branded, and you say, yeah, but it's only a YouTube channel. Well, then, and you don't want a self-hosted WordPress. That's fine. Use the G site that we provide for you in the SEO Shield to make that your money site, and embed your videos in there too. Now you have a link building target for your videos, and you have a trusted source that you can send your Google Ads traffic and your YouTube traffic to start watching your videos in someplace other than in YouTube. Of course, trying to kick the YouTube algorithm in the ass to get you going, to get you more visits from YouTube. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can manipulate this, but the idea is always to verify the entity, meaning create the entity and make sure that Google has information on this entity, validate the entity. Nothing better than to get real people interacting with your entity, and then solidify it, meaning that you extend the entity with all of these different nodes that you create that are part of your main entity. And you're showing Google all of these different things that are all you. And these get traffic, and they'll get traffic over time. And then you run press releases, and then you run link building. The system is always the same. It doesn't change. Whether it's YouTube, whether you do it with Facebook, you can make Facebook your part of your golden frame, your money site, whatever it is you want to call it. But it doesn't matter. We get this question all the time also. Doesn't matter if you don't have a money site, because we will create one for you with the G site, and you can work from there.
Yeah, just to add back onto that, I agree that, again, if I were going to, and I'd have to test, if I was going to be doing video SEO stuff, I would test these, different methods to see what works best. But again, my assumption is, and this is just a wild ass guess because I haven't done any testing recently, but it would be to do 1-2-tier network for the brand, really power up that branded, well, all three networks, but especially the branded networks, so the tier one network. And then, like Marco said, it's about the activity too. And that's one of the biggest things for YouTube, for ranking YouTube videos, is the engagement, right? The activity and engagement. And so there's a number of ways to do that. The way that I have been doing it for the last few years, which is why I don't even bother with the SEO side other than on page anymore, is by buying engagement signals from Google Ads. It's very inexpensive, and it works really, really well. So, that's something I would recommend is a two-tiered network. If it's YouTube syndication only, then, 2-tier networks are great for that, and start powering it up with link building. You could also do embed gigs for that. So you could take like your profile, like again, your Blogger, Tumblr, WordPress, those, and actually embed those, do embed gigs for those. That would help. And then link building to the embeds, all of that. That's like all off-page SEO stuff. But then again, the fire that you can add, or the fuel that you can add to that fire, is the engagement signals that you can buy directly from Google Ads. And it's very, very inexpensive, and it works really well for both geographically targeted clicks, but also clicks and views from a known audience that Google has already determined is interested, or at least likely interested, in your product, service, topic, whatever. Does that make sense? So it's a good question, though.